When she first gets to London, Wonder Woman pronounces it hideous. Yeah, Steve Trevor says it's not for everybody. And I can remember thinking at the time, almost sounds like you two are talking about a different movie. Or two. Or three. Wonder Woman first debuted in 1941. The creation of psychologist William Moulton Marsden, his wife, Elizabeth Holloway Marsden, and their, shall we say, very good friend, Olive Byrne. Apparently Olive was the one who liked the big clunky bracelets. And getting interviews with her former professor published in nationally circulated magazines, like Family Circle. National Publications publisher Max Gaines apparently read one of these. Headline, "Don't Laugh at the Comics," and thought, what's this? A psychologist who isn't running around saying comic books are corrupting the minds and damning the souls of American youth? Who is in fact saying the exact opposite? That comic books have great educational potential? That they are in fact the descendants of the ancient myths we give to kids to tell them how to act right? We must hire this man immediately. So Gaines did. Marsden pitched him Wonder Woman, and she's been in continuous publication ever since. Except for a few months there in the late 80s, after the Crisis on Infinite Earths remade her universe. Shouldn't surprise you that forces within Warner Brothers, which owns National Publications' successor company, DC Comics, have been trying to make a live-action Wonder Woman movie since at least 1996, almost beating Spider-Man's 25 years in development hell. They made an animated movie back in 2009, but it wasn't a Disney movie, and it released straight to Walmart's electronics section, so it was promptly forgotten by pretty much everyone who isn't me. We'll get there, don't worry. But today, we have yet another cruel and unusual production. Though not even the most contrarian dickhead dared to make that joke this time. Directed by Patty Jenkins, writer-director of the Academy Award-winning 2003 Eileen Wuornos movie, Monster. And, oh god, an episode of Entourage. Sweet, shambling, zombie Christ, the Oscar curse is real! Granted, Jenkins really did take time off in the early 2000s to raise a kid. And she was one of the many people who almost directed Thor: The Dark World before leaving over unspecified creative differences. Which works out great for us, since it let her take this project in 2015, when we still had some hope for the future. Oh, wait. No, cut that out. Apart from all the TV shows under his belt, screenwriter Alan Heinberg has the benefit of being an actual comic book writer, which is rarer in Hollywood than you'd think, even now. Most of my comic book reading colleagues know Heinberg from his opening run on Young Avengers, which is about the only good thing to come out of the disassembled crossover. But some of us also know him for the 5 issues of Justice League he co-wrote with Geoff Johns in the wake of Identity Crisis. And the issues of Wonder Woman he wrote a year later in the wake of Infinite Crisis. That entire paragraph will make no sense to anyone who was not reading comic books 10 years ago. Hey, preaching to the choir, bub. If I had my way, and Scarlet Witch's superpowers, I'd walk into DC's new offices and declare with a reality-warping voice, no more crises. And the same problem persists. Yeah, well, you fucked up that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic quote in the last episode. It was Arthur C. Clarke, not Asimov, so... Yeah, that's right. Keep sulking. Heinberg's Wonder Woman books were something of a soft reboot for the series. Something Diana's been through more than a few times, both before and since. They are inevitable, and we have no choice but to consider each one in turn. Every generation grows up thinking this is some new thing. But as Archmaester Rigney once said, time is a wheel, and what has happened before will, perforce, happen again. I still remember a time when I had to explain Wonder Woman's origin to self-professed comic book nerds who recoiled in terror from anything too girly. Their words, not mine. because they were afraid of girls. Seeing Diana go from that undeserved obscurity to become the most popular thing in the DC movie universe is... I can barely describe it. What is this sensation? It's... Is this... It's been so long. Tell me, Hunter, could this be joy? Here as ever she is sculpted from clay by the Queen of the Amazons, had life breathed into her by Zeus, and superpowers bequeathed to her, either by virtue of godly heritage, or by an all-star tag team of Olympian goddesses. Here, as always, Diana is raised on the island of Themyscira, a dot of land in the Aegean Sea, when it's not in another dimension. That's the last place in the world her people's gods still hold some sway. Zeus bequeathed the island, and the immortality inherent in it, to the Amazons at some unspecified point in the classical past, for reasons that shift with pretty much every remake. This time, Diana's mom, Hippolyta, mentions a revolt that freed us from enslavement, though she doesn't mention who did the enslaving. No one wants to blame it on Zeus's bastard son Heracles these days, like George Perez and Greg Potter did back in 1987. Probably because, particularly to my fellow Americans, Heracles is Hercules, and Hercules is either a Disney character or Kevin Sorbo. And he's become a god-bothering asshole in his old age, exclusively making terrible Christo-fascist propaganda films, like God is Not Dead. So we don't need to talk about Kevin. Let's talk about Ares instead. Some say Ares created the Amazons, though Queen Hippolyta tells a different story, giving full credit to Zeus. And why wouldn't she? Ancient Greek historians were pretty damn biased against the Amazons for pretty obviously sexist reasons. And they usually blamed Ares for all the shit they didn't like in the world. A lot like the Amazons here, in fact. If you were in a reading mood, you could read this whole movie as a critique of everyone's philosophical and religious biases. Diana grows up homeschooled in a, for obvious reasons, very devout family. So her naivete in the face of man's world and her conviction that all the hideous things out here must be the god of war's fault is entirely fitting. Plus it allows for all that fish-out-of-water comedy everybody likes. Diana's eventual love interest, and native guide, Steve Trevor, is American, so about the only philosophical thing we learn about him is a credo from his dad. If you see something wrong, you can either do something or nothing. And I tried nothing. Hey, same here, dude. But doing something doesn't always help either. You might say, liberate a Belgian village from German occupation. And that might be fine for a night and a day, but it'll leave the Germans with no compunction about bombing said village from the next town over. And then, of course, there's Ares, a god of war who considers himself a god of truth because of course he does. Nobody liked Ares, not even back in the day. He was always the stupid, whiny man-baby of the family, a god of mass casualties and burning cities. In the Iliad, Zeus even says, "If you weren't my son, I'd throw you down under Tartarus, where I put the Titans." Little wonder every subsequent civilization has tried to make Ares more threateningly badass. Usually by adding armor, or horns, or red eyes, or decent villain monologues. Or all three, as is the case here. So Diana grows up, the only child on an island of immortals, chafing at the provincial nature of her life, and the overprotectiveness of her mom. Until, one fateful day, an American pilot crash lands just offshore. Diana rescues him. He tells the Amazons how fucked up and weird the outside world's gotten in their presumably thousands of years-long absence. And together the two of them journey into man's world to try and make it a better place. The outline is still there, so all that barbecue I offered up must have worked with somebody. Only the details change. For one thing, in this version, Zeus and the other gods are dead. Killed by Ares, according to Hippolyta, and the very Paradise Lost as illustrated by William Blake flashback sequences that illustrate her story near the start. Sad to see the Olympians won't be hanging around to make trouble for the mortals of this DC universe. But hell, they've been dead before. So Steve Trevor informs Themyscira that a massive war has consumed the outside world. In the most obvious change from previous Wonder Woman origins, this war is World War I, instead of its more popular sequel. This change in setting caused a minor tempest in a teapot among good, upstanding, righteous people who were hoping to see Diana punch some Nazis, and among complete and utter morons who blamed the lack of Nazis on the phantom that lives in their heads called political correctness. 9 times out of 10, whenever anyone's bitching about political correctness, especially in a multi-million-dollar summer blockbuster, what they're really bitching about is capitalism. But don't you dare say that unless you're prepared to hear some version of capitalism is the greatest idea that ever chewed its way out of humanity's head. And how dare you criticize it, you treacherous communist scum? What's in your wallet? Money? Hypocrite. Which is the most politically correct thing you can say in the capitalist world. Just doesn't get called that because politically correct is a slur reactionary conservatives invented for things they don't like. So that just gets called conventional wisdom. So here's some conventional wisdom from the movie world for y'all. If you're going to make a $150 million Wonder Woman movie, you're going to need to make at least twice that to break even. Which means you're going to have to show it as many times in as many countries as possible. Including countries that have rules about how much Nazi shit you can put in your supposedly all-ages sci-fi fantasy summer blockbuster. This is why, just in case you were wondering, Captain America's movies contain no more than 1 swastika per film, and they only appear on screen for fractions of a second. Also, before Wonder Woman came out, right after the first trailer hit the internet, in fact, I can remember quite a few original and creative thinkers making some variation of the same joke. Wow, can't wait to watch Captain America, the First Avenger. It looks great. And if that joke occurred to so many randos on the Twitters, it's a safe bet to assume it occurred to at least someone within the WB Borg cube. I'm not sure if any of these considerations led to the temporal setting change all by themselves, or if they all did in aggregate. And frankly, I don't really care, because the change worked in a lot of surprising and interesting ways. Moving the action back to World War I, just in time for the 100th anniversary, no less, softens the explicit nationalism that you're going to find if you go back to those 1942 comics. And it introduces a degree of moral ambiguity to the proceedings that would have been impossible to sell in that other World War. It also allows the movie to pull a fast one on cynical comic book nerds like me who think we can call all of a movie's shots just by watching the fucking trailers. Artistic works, whatever their origin, must defy audience expectations. It's the only way to create enough space for the sublime to flourish in the average punter's calcified soul. Not that it'll always work, but what's better? Defying expectations and being remembered for pissing everyone off, or satisfying expectations and being completely forgotten about in the time it takes someone else to shake some keys in front of our faces. So Steve Trevor is a spy with the American Expeditionary Force. He found a secret Central Powers weapons factory in what's now Turkey, overseen by the head of the German army, General Erich Ludendorff. Steve stole a book of secrets, including the location of other weapons factories in Europe, stole himself a plane, crashed, and the rest you know. Over the course of the film, Diana becomes convinced that Ludendorff is actually Ares in disguise. And the movie does a very good job selling this fake-out. Special props go to the villain monologue Ludendorff makes to Diana later on, about how war is a god that requires regular human sacrifice, and peace is just a temporary armistice between wars. which are, of course, a natural part of the human condition that should be celebrated because they allow men to transcend their petty, everyday concerns and subsume themselves to a higher calling and blah, 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 blah. This is nothing like what you'd hear out of classical Ares. Too articulate, for one thing. But it's pure, undiluted comic book Ares. And unfortunately for everyone who died in World War I, it also passed for conventional wisdom among the European ruling class of the time. I mean, you think anyone outside of Austria and Serbia really gave a fuck about the Austrian crown prince getting shot in the streets of Sarajevo? No. But the dumb fucks in charge really did think war was a generational rite of passage, which is the kind of thinking that gets entire generations killed. Especially now that we, in the world outside Themyscira, all worship machines. Like Enchantress said to her brother back in Suicide Squad. Of course, Ludendorff isn't Ares in disguise. That would be too easy. He's just a dumb asshole, like he was in real life. Though why no one made Danny Houston grow a mustache, I'll never know. Sure, he's hopped up on some kind of super steroid, invented by his mad scientist-in-residence, Dr. Poison. But her presence, and the new hydrogen mustard gas she's working on, provide a better reason for Ludendorff's famous pig-headed stupidity than he ever had in real life. Plus, Dr. Poison's a Golden Age Wonder Woman villain, and Diana's Rogues Gallery needs all the publicity it can get. Not that Dr. Poison gets much in the way of characterization. There is one scene where she almost gets some, at Ludendorff's preemptive victory celebration. But that scene's more about showcasing how Steve, much to my surprise, has some decent spy skills. Other than the standard action movie spy skills of shooting people and blowing shit up real good and shooting people. He can blend into a party, saddle up to his target, and start a conversation about fire and its resemblance to living things. That, if Dr. Poison's expression is anything to go by, actually piques her interest. Only his wandering eyes, noticing Diana across a crowded room, ruin things at the last minute. And can you really blame him? Well, yeah, I can, but I won't, because this is the first time a Chris Pine performance hasn't pissed me off. Might have something to do with the actress he's working with, or the fact that he's no longer doing his bad Shatner impression. The two of them have an occasional, anachronistically awkward conversation in the mold of mid-2000s TV, but for the most part, they work together. Diana's Babe in the Woods act, which isn't an act here, plays off well against Steve's world-weary vet act. He's accepting of all the mystical shit he literally crashed into, but skeptical of its implications, especially in the face of a true believer. So when Diana's impaling of General Ludendorff fails to end the war, Steve's there to at least try to help her through a crisis of faith. It doesn't help in the moment. The real Ares has to show up and do the standard, "with our combined strength, we can end this destructive conflict" speech before it really takes. But Steve's example of someone who still fights in the face of a godless world full of assholes provides Diana with a counterexample to Ares' genuinely cynical reading of the human condition. Especially after Steve makes a noble sacrifice to stop the 11th hour gas bombing of London. Ares, then. Turns out he really has been pulling strings behind the scenes, disguised as the entirely fictional Sir Patrick Morgan, token peacenik in the British Imperial War Council. When Steve's superiors forbid him from destroying one of Dr. Poison's factories in Belgium, lest his cowboy antics endanger ongoing armistice negotiations, it's Sir Patrick who comes through with the cash and the travel papers Diana and Steve need to get a team together and get their asses across the channel. The way he's framed and shot and played by David Thewlis lulls you into a false sense of him as kindly Uncle Moneybags, while the twist of his identity rewards a second viewing by bringing up all kinds of interesting questions. Did he recognize Diana the moment she and Steve barged into the War Council meeting? Probably. Is his pose as a peacenik simple dramatic irony? The shade of Aristotle gives a thumbs up from wherever the hell he is. No pun intended. Or does he know what the upcoming Treaty of Versailles is going to do to the world? Plenty of people did at the time, without the benefit of godly insight. If so, Ares' villain plot boils down to cause World War II, which is entirely in keeping with all of his previous incarnations. As is Diana's response to his big speech about how people are all evil and ugly, and we really should just kill them all, so we can have this world back for ourselves. Diana counters this with the belief that no, only love can save the world. Not the romantic love Hollywood's been selling since its inception. Though there is some of that too. And good on you, Diana. Get some. Happens less often than you'd think. No, she's talking about compassion, which some would define as unconditional love, and consider it essential for any superhero's life. Unconditional, as in not limited, without qualifications. A diamond absolute. Love even in the face of assholes capable of the greatest horrors. Because hey, they're still human. And what other options are there? Narcissistic divinities who viewed humans as their finger puppets? Putting whims in our heads and then washing their hands of the consequences? Fuck all that noise. Christ, it's no wonder we're so subservient to the gods of our current age. Apple and Sony, Disney, and fucking Warner Brothers. Christ. Has anything really changed in 3,500 years? Was Philip K. Dick right? Oh God, there's a thought. The championing of compassionate love is essential to Wonder Woman's character. And to see it on the big screen in this era of misery and death was one of my favorite movie moments of 2017. As much, if not more so, than seeing the sight of her and Ares wrestle their way across a burning airfield. All I wish is that it didn't come so late in the film, and that Steve fucking Trevor didn't have to be the one to illustrate it. That kind of love used to be a main pillar of Amazonian philosophy. Because, of course, it was the main pillar of the philosophy of Wonder Woman's creators. But that was long ago, and compassion is now so far out of fashion, I'm amazed even a vestigial bit of it crops up at the end of the climactic battle here, when all but those of us who really care have usually stopped paying attention. The Amazons do demonstrate love, certainly for Diana, their only child, and I suppose that's more important than speaking it. May we all have aunts as cool as Antiope, God's rest her bones, who teach us to kick ass and take names. And may we all have moms who are better than Hippolyta, who maybe tell us about our ability to absorb and redirect the energy of the Olympian gods before we need to use them. And may the next Wonder Woman movie be better than this one. Ooh, very poor choice of words. No way anyone will take that out of context, no. Don't. I mean, nothing's perfect. Everyone who isn't Diana or Steve, or Ares, is unfortunately flat. Much as I like New Edda, and the team Steve puts together for their mission. Everyone's got their signature personality trait, and their signature weapon, ready to become the action figures they pretty much already are. There's a bit of a directing disconnect whenever action scenes crop up, and my critic senses tell me that's a sign of the second unit taking over. Speed ramping, that action movie habit of slowing down shots for emphasis and then speeding them back up, has returned to comic book film, and I don't like it any more than I did when it was Zack Snyder's trademark. But since he didn't direct this, only produced it, along with a text wall of other people, nobody cares. So it's rough, but it's good. And what I mean when I say I hope the next one is better is we should all know how this goes by now. How it has gone ever since 2008. Companies make the first movie a by now standard superhero origin, in the hope that their second movie will become a billion-dollar Dark Knight-level blockbuster. And sometimes they're so shit scared that it might not make all the money, they just add the Dark Knight to it. But unlike Batman, Diana's got 100 years of in-universe history to play around with, and 75 years of real-world history to fit in there somewhere. The Frame story reveals that these days she's got a job in the basement of the Louvre in Paris, a city where statuesque polylingual brunettes are so thick on the ground she fits right in. No glasses required. So they really could go anywhere from here. They could bring in Cheetah, Giganta, Eris, Dr. Psycho, Cersei, the sorceress from the Odyssey, not the Lannister. Devastation. Hell, if the gods that overthrew them really are all dead, what the fuck happened to the Titans? Are they still down there under Tartarus, waiting for some asshole to set them free? I don't know. All I know is there are 2 good Wonder Woman movies in the world now, which is 2 more than I ever dared dream of. When the 2009 movie came out, I almost had a heart attack, it was so good. And then, don't you even start. What? You've been far too positive for far too long. You forget I am here to see you suffer. Well, how the fuck could I? You're standing right there. You eat all my food, and you don't do the dishes, and you put the books back out of order. I think a reminder is in order. Yes. It's high time something that you utterly despise slithered its way out of the shadows. Suffering Sappho.